Canada, a place where powerful natural beauty is matched only by the kindness of the people that live in it. A place where respect and responsibility are character traits that can be found in every citizen. Our vast nation holds many secrets, the very definition of the Canadian identity among them. Our journey will take us across Canada in the hopes to discover what it means to be Canadian. Good afternoon. My name is Nobu Chern Warwick, Special Correspondent for JN Networks. In this documentary, we will be exploring the phenomenon that is the Canadian identity. Our travels will take us across Canada in the hope to find the answer to the question, what does it mean to be Canadian? The persona of a nation as large and rich as Canada can be a hard topic to explore. We begin our story with a glimpse into the history of the land known as Canada by our forefathers, the First Nations people. In the early 1500s, a European explorer named Jacques Cartier became the first foreigner to describe and map the Gulf of the St. Lawrence. This discovery of Canada led to a height of interest from foreign empires looking to broaden their territories and expedite their influence. A chronicle of Canada after European settlement can be categorized as an all-out battle for our land's vast resources, even if doing so and gaining these resources meant essentially eradicating and wiping out native culture. In order to further understand the history of our nation, we traveled to British Columbia to talk to the former Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
I was the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs from 1993 to 1998. We had a very interesting requirement that was to try to achieve justice for First Nations peoples who had never had treaties in the province of British Columbia. We had an agreement with the federal government, the government of British Columbia, and the First Nations Summit, which was an organization representing the majority of First Nations in the province, that based on a new relationship that featured recognition, and that's an important word because so often First Nations were not recognized as people with rights, and respect. Anyone who's been following the news and has heard about the fiasco at the residential schools, for instance, would realize that First Nations were not treated with respect. What was exactly what was I to do? There were other responsibilities, but my major responsibility was to take the lead role in negotiating these modern treaties. I believe it's really important for Canadians to care so much about being Canadians that they're willing to be involved, think issues through, and get involved in the debate that helps create a healthy and just society, to quote a famous Prime Minister.
Canada is ever-changing and ever-growing along with the rest of the modern world in ways that can only be categorized by the increasing demographics of the people who come here. People who may come here with no money in their pockets, but come with the experiences, talents, and stories which help create the story of our nation.
I chose Canada over anywhere else because I came over as a young man on a holiday to visit a sister of mine, and I fell in love with Vancouver and BC. It then took, many decades before I find myself in Canada again. For me, it's a place where the air is clean, the water's clear, and the people have a lot of spaciousness to be themselves. I believe Canada holds a huge stewardship responsibility for the resources, not only in the land and the animals and the natural resources, but also the cultural resources of First Nations people and all the other immigrants who've arrived over here over the last few hundred years. In a world where there's much repression and constriction, here in Canada there's an opportunity that everyone has enough space to be themselves, see each other, and get along as just one family, because that's what we are.
There is no question that Canadians like to have fun in the winter, but one sport captures the energy and spirits of the Canadian culture, and we are going to find out what that sport is. As the cold wind howls outside in the suburban landscape, they get ready. Early weekend mornings are not spent resting. They are categorized by the passion that somehow fuels these youth to go outside and face the mighty Canadian winter. In layers of clothing, carrying bags filled with equipment, they make the stretch down to the local rink. And that is what Canadians have been doing for as long as our grandfathers can remember. The passion that involves the game of hockey overpowers the general displeasure for the cold. Not all Canadians can be categorized as players of organized hockey on the outdoor rink, as our stereotypes portray us. But hockey is a sport that Canadians have a passion for, and most certainly take an avid interest in. Ask any kid what their favorite NHL team is, and they'll tell you. Even if they don't play a single bit of wintertime hockey, they have seen Hockey Night in Canada.
You grew up in Cape Breton, Newfoundland, of course. What are some differences that you see between a rural community like that and an urban hub like Toronto?
Well, I grew up at a time when, it was a long time ago, and rural, that part of the country was pretty poor. It was very traditional. It was very sparsely populated. So moving to a city like Toronto for me was a major culture shock, because it wasn't very, it has poverty. What you see is prosperity. What you feel is energy. And the opportunities in a place like this were like unlimited compared to what I came from. So that was the biggest single change, was having to adapt to a far more fast-moving, sophisticated culture. And to be alert to the opportunities that were available to you and to be ready to take advantage of them. Where I was coming from, there really wasn't much to offer except traditional fishery, farming, wandering, that sort of thing, coal mining. And if you had more ambition than that, then you had another place like this and go through a whole process of growth and all that kind of stuff.
In your opinion, what are some of Canada's best features to offer, be either culturally or in the physical landscape?
Well, that's mobility is one of them. The ability to go from one part of the country to another, to have the same opportunities available no matter how far you are prepared to manage them. But to be able to move within a very, very large geographical area with an enormous diversity of culture, enormous diversity of economic opportunity, sort of basically design the life you want, where you want it to be. If you want particular kind of weather, you go to one coast. If you want a different weather, you go to the other coast. If you want flat, you go to the middle. If you want big city, you go to Toronto. If you want small, rural, wherever you want. If you want to live a European kind of lifestyle in another language, you go to Quebec. It's huge and it's diverse, and it's just a remarkable part of the world. As a matter of fact, it is the world. You can live in the world in this country without leaving this country.
You're a seasoned reporter who's been all across the world. What kind of differences do you see when you visit a third world country per se, or compared to Canada?
Well, in Canada we have, there's a whole lot of there's obvious differences. People are better off here. There's more political stability here. But I suppose behind all that and probably making all that possible was the fact that if you had to go to one single thing, is that Canadians a long, long time ago realized the importance of working things out, of coming to compromises, of sitting down and having conversations and what you try to find a common ground. You know, remember once upon a time this country was occupied geographically, politically and geographically by two of the most hostile enemies on the planet. I mean, two cultures, two nations, two empires that had been at war for centuries, killing each other. They suddenly find themselves in the middle of this place and they realize we're going to die here of just the weather, if nothing else. We're going to be killed by the natives if we don't learn to get along and work with the natives and work with each other. And so right from there, they just for the sake of survival, they started working with each other, make accommodation. All of a sudden, you know, you had the Anglophones have conquered the Francophones, but the Francophones know how to live here. So we had Anglophones, we had to go to the Francophones and say, well, how do you get through the winter? How do you feed yourself? And they said, well, what do you want to give us? And what do you want? Well, we want to be allowed to go to church on Sunday, to our church. We want to be able to run our villages. We want to be able to elect our little town councils. That's what we want.
The Canadian person cannot be summarized as one person who serves as a perfect model for the rest of our nation. A Canadian can be any race, color, religion, or age. They can be born here or come from the furthest corners of the earth, but anybody can call Canada home.
Today, we journeyed across Toronto in search of the Canadian meaning. To be honest, I started the day visualizing a single answer, a sentence or two that would sum up a description of our identity. But what we found out today was far from this.
The Canadian identity cannot be summed up in words. It is a series of comprised feelings, emotions, and actions. Something that cannot be taught in a book, but instead something that must be experienced, from coast to coast. This is Nobu Chernwarwick, signing off. Thank you for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the festival.